Welcome to Imagine the Evening. We are so grateful you have taken time this evening to join us for what will be a night like no other. My name is Tadashi Anderson, and I am an artist, activist, husband, father, and a friend of peace. I have the privilege of serving on the board of directors, and for the last 4 years have had the opportunity to serve as host and cultural guide for this event. The choice to do this event virtually was a difficult one, but it has given us the opportunity to do something we have never done before. Tonight, for the first time, we will invite you to spend some time on our campus, in our community, and with our people. Since 2014, our founder, Benjamin Wills, has spent time driving and walking the streets of our community and our campus, introducing people to a place long unknown and long unseen. On each of those tours, a seed has been planted and an invitation has been extended to join us in imagining a new story. In 2015, that story officially began as we opened a school in a community that had been void of one for 20 years. With a class of 12 kindergarten students and 1 teacher, we began this journey. Tonight, we are inviting you to walk with us for an evening and begin to imagine. Imagine equity being possible today for the often unseen children, families, and communities in Atlanta. Imagine a place where daily children and families are welcomed, loved, and seen as made in the image of God and worth thoughtful investment of time, talent, and treasure. Imagine an institution that educates whole children, supports whole families, and provides growth and change opportunities for whole communities in a high-quality, Christ-centered learning environment. Imagine the flourishing and shalom God intended for all that He has created being experienced in our midst today. Tonight, we are inviting you on a journey to imagine with us. It is an evening we believe will help us together see, hear, and imagine God's activity in the world today. So again, I say, welcome.
Over the last year, I've reflected on all we've seen and experienced, whether that be the global pandemic we're still walking through or the growing awareness of racial injustice and disparities in our country. There's been a lot for any of us to try and reconcile with our visions for what we thought the world ought to be like. In this time of crisis, I've been reminded of 2 things I believe are embodied by this community. The first is that people are resilient. Particularly the kids and the families we walk with daily, they are resilient. They're determined, they're strong and courageous, and in the face of great difficulty have been able to model and teach us how to have this kind of active resistance and continue fighting to thrive and not just survive. When the pandemic began, as a leader, I had the internal crisis probably every leader or every person had. What will life look like? How will we adjust? What does it mean to be a school in a community being disproportionately affected by a virus and already void of so many resources? To not be able to be present, to not be able to do the things we would normally do to be helpful in a time of need. But seeing how our students and our families partnered with us, seeing how our community of supporters partnered with us to do things like get laptops and internet into homes, to get food to families that needed support, to remain connected to one another through these technologies really gave me a peace. But it also gave me a new kind of burden. I felt invited by this time we were all in to share the stories of those impacted in new ways and to invite people with us to imagine the world in a different way. I felt a burden, really an invitation from God to dream again, to ask the questions again about what is really possible with this work. Whole children, whole families, whole communities is so much more than just a mission statement. It is embodied in the eyes of the kids we serve It's present in the homes of the families we walk with, and it is emanating out into the community from this space we cultivated here in this place. The second reminder for me in this time has been, this works. For those that have been supporting us for some time, or those who are just hearing about the work we do, I want you to know that this works. We've built more than a school. We've cultivated a community. We've built a place, and we've planted hope in what's been the darkest and most challenging time we may ever face. We've seen the hope and joy spring up, and it's invited us to dream again. It's inviting us to dream about the kind of community and the kind of world we want to live in. It's inviting us to dream about the things we want to build and the ways we want to interact and the connection we've shared. And it's invited us to dream about how we sustain and grow that to fully live in the imagination God's given for the people and places He created.
Good morning. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Bella. Bella. Bella.
So my name is Kiara. I have 4 children. Miles, who's in 5th grade at Peace Prep. Carson is in kindergarten at Peace Prep, and Bella is in pre-K at Peace Prep. My oldest, Miles, is super excited about Peace Prep. I think he enjoys it the most. All he talks about is how excited he is, especially about Bible class that the principal, Mr. Ellis, is teaching.
In the place to your parents to watch movies.
You feel like they're family, you feel very connected. And it's not just that my children are going to school here, but they're like family to me. Like any time that I need anything, they'll reach out, they'll check on me, check on my kids, and I'm just very grateful that I get to experience it. And I just wish that other families could experience it as well. I was a single parent of 4 children, so it was really, really hard for me, but I made it through. The dreams that I have for my kids are to break my family's generational curses, and I want to do everything I can to point them to Christ, so that I know that when they become adults, they'll have like trials and tribulations, and I just want them to know that, to know for sure that God will carry them through. What I love about it the most is getting up every morning, walking across the street, and you see the founder of the school. They're taking temperatures, and I'm pretty sure he knows all of them by name, because when we're there, he greets them every day, and that's very humbling to see. Like, I don't see my life without Peace Prep, so I plan to have my kids graduate here from high school as they're adding the grades, and maybe even Benjamin will open up a college too. We can just send them there too.
Imagine what would happen if they encountered the light.
Embraced it like seeds in their tiny palms. Could you see how they would grow? How different their lives would be if rooted in hope and the impact on those in their surroundings, able to grasp
that they are more. There would be no limits to where they could go, no ceilings to their dreams, no boundaries, no walls. You cannot box a kindled soul that understands who they are. It is apparent. We were created for such a time as this.
A time where they need to know light matters now more than ever, that in a world that orbits at the speed of inconsistency, the tensions of life are no match for heaven's hands.
Can you imagine if they knew they were made to illuminate, to shine, radiate like the sun, scattering the deepest parts of darkness with eternal strength from above? For what ignites them is greater than circumstance. Light is
a guide to recover the fragments of hope, lost in rubble and sand. It searches for despondent bones and commands what is dead to rise from the ashes and live again.
Light is where love reaches beyond the boundaries of words, a force that scales the city walls and causes shadows to bow. It pours through windows like the blood spilled at the cross. Light is Jesus and the gospel in action. proximity to the solution of our afflictions. He is our source, our reason to be. Imagine how they will see brighter days, how they will see better tomorrows, how they will know how to shine in a future redefined by their glow. Because the light has come, and the light is here.
Well, Benjamin,
Yes, sir.
7 years in, bro.
It's wild.
And we still doing it.
We are still doing it. We're still having conversations.
Still having conversations, man.
People are going to just enjoy it.
It might look a little different every time, but we're still doing it. It's not in person like we probably would have desired.
Yeah.
But we're still doing it, man. How you been?
I've been good, man. It's been a crazy year, like with everybody else.
Yeah, man.
And so, yeah, we've been just trying to be creative and trying to still continue to do the things that we do because they're important to us.
Yeah.
And this time's always been really important. It's always that moment in the fundraiser I like the most because I never talk at the things.
True.
But I like to sit in the chair with you, and I love to just kind of do this dialogue and
bro.
let people a little bit behind the curtain of how we're thinking through the things we're thinking through.
I honestly think, based on people's comments of our time together over the years doing this, they think we grew up together.
Yeah.
And so I just started leaning into it. Like, yeah, man, since second grade I've been knowing, just lean into it.
Yes.
And then later get caught and have to be like, I'm sorry, I was playing.
Yeah.
But I want to catch you off guard a little bit. I know you've been busy outside of this world in and of itself, and you started a podcast.
I did start a podcast.
Yeah, I just want you to say a little bit about that. I don't know if everybody who's watching us knows about this.
Yeah, no, that's really good because that's really been a really connective piece for us. So it's called The Sound of Peace.
Yeah.
And the idea was, as I walk through life and I'm hearing sounds and I'm experiencing things, how do we share that with other people? How do we just take the ordinary moments of our days, bring them into like a listening session almost to hear people's hearts, right?
Yeah.
So to hear, my heart, Sarah's heart about starting the school, or to hear our director of community development share about, why are we involved in housing? This latest episode we talked with a teacher, like why do you teach and why do you teach the way you teach? And so for us, it's just a connective piece that we wanted to have for people to know us a little bit on a little bit deeper level.
Yeah. It's almost as if you're linking the ability to grasp peace to beyond just imagination, but sensory. We can experience it in a real world.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of reorienting us to everything we're seeing and doing. I don't know if you're a Brother Lawrence fan, but Practicing the Presence of God is probably one of my favorite little books. And just thinking about like how we experience God in the sounds we hear, in the wind, in the sunrise, all those things. And so we just wanted to pull in some of those sounds of what does this place sound like? What do the people here sound like? And what is in their hearts? And how do we then share that with people?
Amazing, bro. Look, I'm happy for you. It's long overdue.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll be on an episode. Who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know. Maybe. So, man, I want to jump into some questions I got for you beyond that because, man, it's been a ride.
Yeah.
It has been a ride, and I know people who are watching have experienced something very similar, and yet maybe not as specific to what you have to deal with in your role here. So over the last few years, we've had a chance to sit and talk, and it's an opportunity to help people learn. Like they get to learn about what we do here, how to celebrate what's going on, how to actually understand how this all came to be, past stories that led to current ones. So much, man, and even get to hear your heart. But one thing I want to know is, from just a practical standpoint, what is the last year, especially the day-to-day of last year, been like for you? School, kids, family, community, like what's that been like?
Yeah, as I reflect on it, man, I think about March 13th, right? March 13th, 2020, that was the last day we had school before everything kind of shut down.
They declared a national emergency.
Yeah, everything kind of started going sideways really fast. And just a few days before that, we thought like you put up signs to remind people to wash their hands and you wipe stuff down more frequently and then everybody's gonna be fine. We were just so almost naive and optimistic that, but also like had no clue what was gonna happen. And I remember that day right before we were getting ready for dismissal, I had a stack of letters that I was gonna give to parents that said, we're closing for 2 weeks and here's some kind of next steps. And someone on our team, our leadership team, was like, on a scale of 0 to freaking out, where are you? And I said, we were made for this, you know? And in a lot of ways, it was almost like a reaction, like muscle memory to know that like God has prepared us for this. We don't know what we're walking into, but we know who we're walking into it with.
Yeah.
And so the last year has just been a test of that every day.
Yeah.
We've had to decide, yes, remember, God is still walking with us, even when it's gotten really dark or really difficult. So it's been hard.
Yeah.
We've had to be flexible. We've had to figure out, how do you get a laptop in every home? How do you get teachers set up to do virtual learning? How do you still connect as a staff? How do you encourage people that are feeling deeply discouraged because they're not connecting in the way they want to and their whole life's being reoriented?
Yeah.
How do you still make sure, when you're a school that offers breakfast, lunch, and dinner, how do you make sure kids are still eating and families still have what they need? We're seeing our grocery stores, our Family Dollar and things like that, not have stuff for months at a time. And so it's been a year of like seeing incredible challenge, but then seeing the people in our community, the ones we live and work with every day, and the people outside who are supporting our community really come together to meet that challenge. And so it's just reminded us of that thing that I said in the beginning, like we were made for this. Like we were made to respond to the things that life throws at us because of who is walking with us, and that's God.
Bro, that'll preach. That, first of all, you were made for this. Second of all, I may not know what I'm walking into, but I know who's walking into it with me.
Yeah.
Bro, that is a level of faith and a perspective that most of us would aspire to, but when the rubber meets the road, it gets kind of difficult to do so. But as you were sharing, I imagine some of that muscle building and muscle memory you spoke about had to come from when you first started and the origins of this. Can you share a little bit about that for me? Not necessarily the full thing, just a moment where you remember this is where I have to persevere or tuck tail and run. Like what was that moment? What was a moment of building the muscle memory?
Yeah, I mean, so many times. So I think about like that. There was a year where all I did was, meet people for coffee, talk to people, put people in my minivan, drive them around the neighborhood, share this vision. There were no kids, no building, nothing. And we're just saying, here's what we want to do. Here's what we believe can happen. And there were many, many moments throughout that year where it would have been easier to say like, you know what, let's just go back, get a regular job and like figure something else out that's simpler. Like there's other solutions to this, perhaps. So there was a lot of years, but I also remember during those years, like moments where people would like give, like where I'd see a donation come in online, and not just that, someone would call me and say like, hey, I just want you to know we're with you, we're fighting for you, we're gonna do this together. And then when we opened, it's not as if like everything was perfect and beautiful either, right? So it's like you start and you have challenges that you're trying to work through with the dynamics of actually running the thing. And then I think about moving into this building, and I think about the things that this building responded to us with, like flooding every time it rained, or getting broken into a few times in the beginning, or just doing things that like you just have to learn and figure out. So it's like, you get a wet vac and you mop it up, and you move the classroom from this room to another room so the kids can still do what they do. So there have just been, so many moments throughout the years where we did, I think, build that muscle memory you're talking about of knowing like, oh, we've seen this before. And I think about that every year as we start, is like, we know it's a mad dash to get all the uniforms and to get the school supplies and to get everybody prepared and to get everything ready. But we know that God's gonna be with us and that people are gonna show up, the kids are gonna show up, the teachers are gonna show up, and joy is just gonna burst in this place. And so you're hopeful every time you walk in this place to see that.
No, that's good. That's just so true. Tonight is a night where we get to invite people to come on our campus. And so the fruit that feeds your faith as you come here every day, they get an opportunity to see that now, to know that even in the midst of something like 2020 and a national emergency and a pandemic, like they get to see that God is still faithful to produce fruit in this area. And so, bro, that's beautiful. I love it. So now speaking of 2020, because again, you mentioned May 13th and moving forward, 2020 was just an interesting year, man. And I would love if people watching could take a moment to even recall what it was like in March, April, May of 2020, and what they were doing, what they were dealing with, and how it was affecting them to live in a moment of uncertainty and yet try to press forward. And then we put our focus on you, and we put our focus on peace, and we think about COVID and having to deal with that as you run a school, as you try to live and not only be a part of, but shepherd a community. And so, man, how did COVID specifically affect the work here at Peace?
Yeah, I mean, so like everybody else, we couldn't have in-person school for probably for a longer period of time than others, other communities, because we're just acutely aware that the way COVID disproportionately affected black and brown and low-income communities, we're all aware of that. Like there's statistical proof of that. So we're watching things like what is the hospital capacity at our local hospital that we know if somebody got it, they would go to, and we're saying we cannot be a factor that led to someone having COVID. So for us, it looked like being really cautious. It looked like being really careful. It looked like being really slow in decision making, but being really decisive and continuing to say to our families, here's what we can do. So it looked like virtual learning. I mean, it looked like a really robust virtual learning program where teachers were logging on with our kids, 4 days a week, and sometimes a fifth day to do extra intervention. It looked like food support. So at the height of it, we were serving 18 families weekly. So having groceries show up, get sorted, and then delivery drivers take those to people's homes to minimize families' exposure, so they could stay home as much and shelter in place as much as possible. It looked like getting internet in homes for families, and it looked like just staying connected. I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of is that there was not a single family that we were not connected with, that we were not talking with on a daily or weekly basis to say, how are things going, how can we help, and just we're here for you and with you. And so it's looked like the kind of an amplified version of some of the things other people may have experienced, but also it's looked like a really supportive and beautiful picture of what we've cultivated here.
Wow, man, that's heavy.
Yeah.
That's heavy, man. I commend the teachers here, the administration, the staff, everybody who went above and beyond. Like just, being here, being a part of the Peace family, I see it and I know, you're really going above and beyond what your daily duties would normally be. And on top of that, just because you're a teacher already, you have a role in their life that goes beyond being at the blackboard, but you have a role that is caring for their well-being, and you're looking for them to find a way to cope in this hardship because the weight that they felt was real.
Yeah.
So besides the lifestyle of it all, how did COVID affect specifically educating the children? I mean, I know you mentioned getting internet in homes and the teachers stepping it up, but how does that look even from a day-to-day?
Yeah, so I mean, one, it's an additional trauma, right? It's a trauma that we've all collectively experienced, right? So you have COVID, then you have, national and global unrest around systemic injustice and racism. And so every person over the last year or so has experienced two really big traumas, right? So that impacts the way you're able to learn and be and just move in the world. And then, you're disconnected in a sense. You're not physically present with one another. That changes the dynamic, especially for our early learners. And so, those kinds of challenges, and then just consistency has been difficult and things like that. And so there's a lot of work to do, which is why we're starting to imagine, right? It's why we're starting to dream again and say, how can we really focus on educational recovery for kids that might have already been behind, now are further behind, and kids that were doing okay, now they're behind because every kid is behind. And how do we really kind of double down on our commitment that we made when we came and started the school and partnered with the community in that way? How can we double down on that commitment and really make sure we're solving the actual problems that were created from our unique context?
Wow. I love how you were able to sum it up, but as you kind of walked through your answer, my mind was working through the rest of 2020 and coming into 2021 and just starting to, in a real way, sense the hardships of the families, the heaviness of this place as far as the burden that laid upon your shoulders. And then again, man, the way I would think a normal day would go for an educator, and then to be asked for some to work in person with students in class, as you also considered virtual learning for kids who are at home, and to do that day in and day out. as you are also separated from people because you're trying to quarantine, you're trying to protect yourself, man, there's so much there to consider. Man, so thank you, man. Sincerely, thank you. I appreciate you imagining in this season. You mentioned it in your answer, and so I want to know more about Imagine. Can you explain for me the theme a little bit? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the things I love about this moment is always kind of unpacking the theme and saying, here's the heart behind it. And for us, this is something that we'll talk about for the next year and really kind of dissect more. But there's a couple things. One is I want to remind people that this was born in God's imagination. That like God designed and imagined a world that we would live in. Yeah. And that's not necessarily what's happening right now. Right? Not everyone has access to live in God's imagination for their life. Totally. And I want to acknowledge that. And I want to acknowledge that God shared part of his imagination with me in 2012. And so we're coming up on 10 years of trying to walk that out and trying to say to people, here's what I believe God imagines for this community. Can you walk with us and can you see it too? So that's a big part of it. And so there'll be a lot of stories over the next year of just, here's what this has been like for the last decade, right? The second thing is, I want to acknowledge with imagination that imagination is about seeing something different in the world, right? It's about saying the world's not looking like we think it should look. And so let's address that. And I think so then it becomes a discipleship question. And so most of us live in this cycle of orientation, disorientation, reorientation, right? And so we have an idea about the world or a people group or a thing, right? Yeah. Something happens and shakes that up a little bit. And then we have to be reoriented. So Imagine for me is also an opportunity for us to say, all right, collectively, we're acknowledging poverty, really bad. Education in our country, lots of disparities. Systemic racism, really bad. Lots of things we're seeing as people who follow Jesus, not as they should be, right? So we're disoriented. Well, how can we be a part of reorienting people? How can we imagine together? How can we be a part of saying, look at the fruit of what God's doing in this community when people just show up, when they give of their time, their talent, their treasure, and they look at the world in a different way. What could we build? So Imagine is about recasting vision for people who want to be reoriented to what was God's idea for human flourishing, for peace, for shalom. And so that's what Imagine is about for me. It's a deep burden in my heart to faithfully walk out and steward well that which God shared with me 10 years ago now.
Oh my Lord. Like, so, I hear the word Imagine. You shared it with me while you were, deliberating and thinking through it. And I hear the word, and of course I think imagination. And I think, man, that's great because we all have imaginations and we've all been kids and we know what it means to kind of dream and wonder in our minds about certain things. But what you just described was not only that, but it was an elevated description and definition because this was in God's imagination. But then you also gave aim to it and made it practical and said this imagination now needs to be lived out. If there's something wrong and we imagine a better moment, now what are you going to do to bring about the better moment? Is that right? Would you say
that's exactly right. I mean, I think about the disciples in the book of Acts, right? You think about these people who have seen Jesus die, be buried, resurrected, walk around, and their imaginations are rocked, right? They can totally see this guy's worth following. His ideas are true. Everything he said came to pass. And what did they do? Right? They turn the world upside down, is what the scriptures say. They begin to care for the poor. They begin to care for the widows. They begin to sell their property and put their money together so that nobody in their community had need. They begin to radically reshape the economy, the life, and an entire government was sort of overwhelmed by this ragtag group of fishermen and people that had followed this one guy around who said, I want you to see the world the way my Father intended for it to be. Like, that's the story we're living in. It's the gospel, right? And so I just feel really compelled to remind us again, this is what we've always been after. And we've parked ourselves in other parts of the story That's been helpful for a season. Now we need to go somewhere else. We need to go to another part of the story and begin to dream about what we can do with the exceptional amount of resources we have in our city, in our country, in our world, to look and see something that we were looking away from for a long time in our lives.
Yeah, bro, thank you. That's convicting for me. It's inspiring for me. Yo, that's huge, bro. So I'm thinking about everything you're saying, and my mind kept going toward this picture of, man, I want to see what this does to the community, what this does to a family or a kid's education for a child who never even knew what was beyond their neighborhood borders to now be dreaming of higher learning and education. Yo, that's phenomenal, man. So as my mind is doing that, I'm thinking, I want to know now, like, what are your hopes, right? Like, there's a lot of things coming around the corner, of course, but what are your hopes? What are you hopeful for? And what are some of the big things, challenge-wise, that are happening that you're gonna have to face?
Yeah, I mean, so we're just really hopeful to keep growing, to keep building on what we've built in these first 6 years as a school, to move into middle school. As we watch our kids physically grow, we're inspired by that.
Yeah,
we're like, we're creating a world that we want them to live in and that we would be proud of all of us living in together. Yeah. And so we're hopeful about that. We're hopeful about being able to build a building, right? Getting into kind of phase 2. The last time we were together in person, we were just getting ready to buy this building. And so we've bought it. Yeah. We've dreamed, we've planned, we've mapped out what it would look like to build 35,000 square feet of a school building, and to see what that would do for the imagination of our community, right? To physically look out your window or your door and see a school building go up. Yeah. I mean, it just starts to take the doors off of what you believe is possible. It takes the limits off of it. So we're hopeful for that. And then we're just hopeful, again, from a discipleship perspective, that more people will walk with us and more people will see what's going on here, and that it would transform their lives, that it would transform their families, their jobs, their careers, their relationships. Like, we want to be participatory with the people that are involved in this work to say, here's one application, but now apply that in other spaces in your life and just see what life starts to look like when we live this out, when we walk this out. And so I'm hopeful that we're planting that kind of seed in the world, that this isn't just about what we can get, but it's also about what we can give.
Yeah. So you remind me of someone well, you are a shepherd. I mean, you are a pastor, but your heart is such one of a shepherd. And I imagine, I was reading recently about the prodigal son story, when really Christ said it's the story of two sons. And then I thought, man, let me look up the word prodigal. I never thought about that. And I looked up the definition of it, and it did speak of reckless spending, but it talked more about lavishing upon someone, almost in a sense of doing it overkill and lavishing upon them. And I realized in the moment, it's really a story about a loving father lavishing all he has upon his kids. And I think about this moment now in my imagination, and I hear your heart as a shepherd, and I'm like, this is a moment for you to help bring forth the plan of God to lavish upon his kids, literal kids, lavish upon them his love and what is meant for them in God's economy and being image bearers of the Lord. That's amazing, bro. Yeah. So any final thoughts as we get out of here? That's all I had for you. Is there anything else you'd want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been really good. I just want to say, walk with us, just like really walk with us, journey with us, enter this conversation with us. Like, this is the invitation to talk with us about what this means and what this looks like in the world. And let's continue talking and doing this together.
Bro, always a pleasure. Yeah. Look, COVID, I'm gonna pound you up.
All right, man.
There it is.
Hi, I'm Rue Gunter, Development Officer here at Peace Prep, and it is my privilege to invite you into financial partnership with us this evening. Since 2015, we've grown from an initial class of just 12 students to this year having the opportunity to serve 60 children and their families in grades pre-K through 5th. We've been able to add a grade each year as we continue towards our full vision of being a pre-K through 12th grade school. That growth has been made possible by consistent and growing generosity of individuals and businesses and churches and foundations who have responded to what we see and sense together as God's heart for this work. Tonight, you've had the opportunity to see just one family and many other images of kids impacted by this giving. There's more ahead, but we wanted to share some exciting news with you. Thanks to the generous support of a few individuals, we've had the opportunity to double the impact of your giving tonight with a matching gift. Before we began the evening, $60,000 was actually pledged in support of doubling any gift that you give tonight. Not everyone realizes that 100% of our operating budget comes from donation. And due to our economic impacts of COVID-19, we've actually committed to raising that 100% of cost for all families to attend this school. And your support goes directly towards our $1.5 million operating budget. Whether it's just a one-time contribution or recurring monthly gift, your gift tonight will allow us to continue to come together and imagine.
Over the years, we have been blessed by the wisdom, the grace, and passion of our keynote speakers. Tonight is no different. Karen Laritz met and married her college sweetheart, Crawford Laritz, on May 22, 1971. They have been partners in ministry since June 6, 1972. They have 4 adult children, 6 adorable grandsons, and 5 precious granddaughters. The Laritz reside in Marietta, Georgia. Her ministry includes speaking and teaching at conferences, seminars, and retreats. Her ministry opportunities have taken her across America, the Caribbean, Fiji Islands, shout out to my polys out there, and South Africa. Not to mention the work her and her husband have done here at Peace. She has been on both radio and television addressing issues on the family and Christian growth. She is a co-author of Building Character in Your Children and Your Marriage Today and Tomorrow with her husband. Karen has held several positions on various organization boards, and she has served on local civic and community committees. Sharing with people the love of God and His plan for their lives is her passion in life. Serving God is her joy. So without further ado, please welcome Karen Laritz.
What a year 2020 has been. We will forever remember the pandemic. Over 500,000 souls have been lost. Millions have lost their jobs. It seemed as though the misery went on and on and on. Every segment of our society was impacted. We are still facing the ravages of the past year. And let me be honest with you, I really struggled. When we had the shelter in place that seemed to go on, I was okay the first couple of days and a couple of weeks, but it was getting to me. It seems as though any time I would open up the Word of God and sit and have my quiet time, it seems as though the words would just fall off the pages. And I would listen to the worship music, and as I'm walking, and I'm trying to figure out, God, what's happening? Will we ever return to normal? And what is normal? But you know, when you have a relationship with God, and God is listening, it's time to listen to what He's saying. And of course, I would sit down this one particular time, and I opened up the Word of God, and Psalm 145 marinated in my soul. Every single verse. Let me just share a couple of things. It begins by saying we need to exalt and praise our God because of His greatness, His glory, His splendor, and the majesty of who He is. Talks about, in Psalm 145, about looking at the wondrous works He gives and His awesome deeds. Two of my favorite portions of Psalm 145 happens twice. It says, the Lord is faithful in all His words and kind in all His works. That's time to have a great praise party, isn't it? Because when you get down to verse 21, it says, your mouth will speak the praise of the Lord. And boy, was I ready to have a praise party for God, because I remember His grace and His goodness. I had a friend that shared with a group of us about these 2 words that she challenged us to be inspired with. And you know, I listen to words and I'm trying to come up with some things that get your body moving and your mind in the right frame of reference. And she said these 2 simple, profound words. Listen to this, but God. But God. And so when I sat there and I was listening to some music and just marinating on Psalm 145, I was remembering those but God moments in my life, and so timely for her to share that with us. Friends, I stand on the shoulders of women that loved me and believed in me. You see, I was born to an unwed teenage young woman in what they call the concrete jungle of Philadelphia. And believe me, in my mind, I really remember seeing those tall tenement buildings. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but these buildings went 30 stories high within a one-block area. The winos were there was drugs, there were drunks, there were gangs. And in that moment, I just knew that God was going to do something as I remembering where I had come from. Well, this illegitimate black child spent the first 30 days in the NICU unit in Philadelphia Hospital. My mother would go on and she would have a total of 4 children, 4 different fathers. I was the oldest, I was the big sister, and I took my responsibility pretty heavy. It's sort of as though I carried a weight on my shoulders. I felt hopeless and I felt helpless. And I decided I'm gonna help Mom out. She doesn't need any more children. She could just do without someone else that was really struggling. And so I decided to go to the medicine cabinet. And there in our little house, my mother had a condition that she had these pills, and I would take some of those pills every couple days until I got a great handful, and I was going to lie in bed and fall asleep and go to heaven. Well, I was afraid to do that because I don't like to swallow things. I had big tonsils. So I went back to the medicine cabinet and put it in. Is that ridiculous or what? It is ridiculous. But I was really wanting to leave this earth. Then I decided, okay, let me just run away. It'll be okay. Mom will be fine. She'll find someone else to take care of the kids and all the rest of that stuff. So I got my stuff in a pillowcase. I went down to the door, and I noticed that it was dark outside. I was going to run away. Now, I was going to run away on a train in Philadelphia. How dumb is that? But it was dark, and I decided, that's not going to work. Good thing, because at that time, God was getting my attention. I stumbled across this one particular church after searching for, throughout our community, a church to go to. And I went and knocked on this church door and opened the door, and there inside were this group of people that remained in our area, even though white flight had taken place in this area. They stayed there. They did not care that my skin was clothed in a different color. They loved me. They invited me in, and they became my family. And I'll never forget Pastor Kowalczyk preaching about the love of Jesus, or Miss Bourne, who just told me and showed me what it really meant to love in a loving relationship, because she was married. I never saw that in my home. Then I remember Miss Betty Nichols. She was a vibrant missionary to the Philippines that had come and lived in the community and wanted to stay there in that church. Well, she became my teacher and showed me the love of God and how to go to scriptures and have it to impact my life. And then it was Miss Betty Entwistle. Miss Entwistle was a Christian service director at a Bible college there in Philadelphia. And wouldn't you know that a couple years later, she would introduce me to some of the students at that college, because she really felt as though God had something for me, even though I didn't believe it myself. And she introduced me to a man called Crawford Wheeler Loritz. And those of you who know my story know that we will celebrate 50 years of marriage. It only happened because I had a personal relationship with God. I had come to know him in a personal way. And God has transformed my life, given us 4 wonderful children. He has given us 11 grandchildren. We have traveled throughout the country and the world talking about the love that changed my life, knowing that he could do the same thing in others' lives. Well, here at Peace Prep Academy, we are seeing some but God moments too. I went online and looked at the 2010 census. I don't know if you ever decided to look and see some of the areas here in the metro area where people are living, but this is what it said in the 2010 census of English Avenue. Among the 3,300 residents, 97% of them are African Americans. 67% of them at that time lived below the poverty level. 50% of those did not graduate from high school, and 43% there's vacant housing there in the area. Well, what is it that God believed on 2015 to raise up Peace Prep Academy? I'm really excited about this school, this ministry, what they're doing in the community. I firmly believe that the But God opportunities and stories continue at Peace Prep Academy. Let me just share with you just a little bit that has touched my life, that is touching all the lives here in English Avenue and throughout the metro area. They believe that we are a place for peace for the whole child, the whole family, and the whole community. And their mission is this. I'm really excited about things that are missional. Listen to this. It's a place to educate the whole child. Why? Why would you say that? Well, if you go to the Bible and look at it, you'll notice in Psalm 139, it talks about, but God, he formed everyone in their mother's womb. That all of us are fearfully and wonderfully made. Next, it says to support the whole family. Why? Genesis 1:27. It says that God created every one of us in his image to both reflect and represent him. That's a but God concern. And lastly, and the mission is to provide growth and opportunities to the whole community in a high quality, Christ-centered learning environment. Why, would you say? Well, Jeremiah 29 says, but God has a plan, a future, and a purpose for each one of them. Let me read to you another portion of scripture about the big why. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 and 5 says, but God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace, we have been saved through faith. Wow, that's good. Peace Prep Academy is concerned about the whole child, the whole family, and the whole community. And through their vision, we are seeing an army of frontline warriors. Though they're tired, though money is low, though change is slow to come, though needs are many, I am inspired by the words of an old gospel hymn as I thought about Peace Prep Academy. Listen to these. Some of the lyrics says, I don't feel no ways tired. I've come too far from where I started. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. Those are unimaginable kinds of words as we sit here in English Avenue when the 2010 census painted a bleak cloud over the area. God stepped in. God raised Peace Prep Academy in 2015, and he's still doing some great things. So imagine with us more but God opportunities and stories to come, that they will fuel the soul for us to carry on his mission, that Peace Prep Academy will be a place for the whole child, for the whole family, and for the whole community. God is doing some miraculous things here in English Avenue, and we invite you to join us for the unimaginable that will be those that will know God in a personal way. Let me pray for us. Lord, I just thank you so much that you have raised up this great lighthouse in the community, that Peace Prep Academy believe all the things that you've said, that these children are fearfully and wonderfully made. You have a place for them. They are here to represent God because they are in the image bearers of him. And Lord, that you're going to do some incredible things in our community. So Lord, thank you for what you're going to do. We're imagining big things, and we invite you to give us those but God opportunities and stories to write down forever and ever. In your name we pray, and amen, and amen, and amen.
So we just come from a fundamental belief that we did not discover this place, that God lovingly created it, that God lovingly created all people and all places. And the purpose that God created people and places for hasn't been fully realized on this side of eternity, right? Like we see brokenness in the world, we see poverty, we see hardship, and we look at that and then we say, this doesn't align to what God's design is for the world. That just changes our perspective as we approach people, because we approach them for relationship and we approach places to be restorers. We are truly trying to live amongst and with people, again, that God lovingly created, and coming and saying, your story matters, I see you, I want to know you. It's saying something is broken here. We may not have been responsible for it, but we are responsible for seeing it be made new, because that is what God has called us to. We started this thing with 12 kindergarten kids in one little classroom, and our office space was so small that we could just fit one desk.
Benjamin and I, one day, were just staring out the door of the building here and looking across the street at all the abandoned properties and the rundown buildings that some of our students were even living in. We're like, we've got to do something about this. If we want to see kids stay in the school from kindergarten through 12th grade, they've got to have a place to live. We're like, let's start buying these and renovating them. 5, 6 years later, we've got 7 grades, almost 80 kids, and we've got 31 units that are right across from the school where Peace Prep families are living in. I think those are all part of God's heart to restore broken things and bring things back to the way He intended it.
My biggest impression on the school is the fact that they serve the whole family and not just the child. And I say that because Peace Prep gave me the opportunity to get back up on my feet.
It's the least of these of our city, the ones that are marginalized, that are forgotten about, that are pushed aside. We are now seeing them move into places that are restored, that are for them, that are done with their hands, and now they're moving back into it, and they feel as if this is for them, and they are part of the ownership of it.
When I first came over to see what was happening at Peace Prep, I was impressed. I didn't expect to see what I saw. There's black and brown kids in this neighborhood, and I think we're all starting to realize that we need policy, we need education, but you also need spiritual formation. And I think those elements together are exactly what the culture of this neighborhood needs. I'm an outsider to this community. I'm not from Atlanta, but I'm from a community like this one. And I think the words of Dr. King come to mind. Wherever there's injustice or wherever there's neglect, there are no outsiders. Once we all know and learn what's going on, it's on each of us to make it our problem, to make it our issue.
Being a pre-K through 12th grade school is our ultimate vision, and so what we want to see is that we've walked with someone through their formative years and then launched them out into the world as a person who is seen and known, and so they can be postured that way as well. And so now what we think about is, how do we get a physical home that fits the vision of this place? Ideally, we'd love to see a 35,000 square foot building constructed that's new classrooms, office space, a gym, a commercial kitchen, space for the community to dream together about even more of what's possible. Because again, we haven't even scratched the surface on what our community's dreams and desires are. I think a big part of what God has placed me here to do is to help people to see, to hear, and to imagine the activity of God in our world, and then to say, like, nothing is impossible. That if God's big heart is to see all of this stuff repaired, restored, renewed, if that starts within us and then works outwardly, then let's make that possible together. It's been our honor and privilege to have you join us for this evening. We're praying that it has helped you to see, hear, and imagine the activity of God in the world. There are 2 specific asks we have as our time together comes to a close. First, we would love to ask you a guiding question for us. Who else needs to know about the work God is doing at Peace Prep? This evening is going to be available on our website to share, and we would love for you to prayerfully consider sharing it with those who you believe may join you and us as we continue to imagine together. Second, would you prayerfully consider partnering with us financially? We're excited about the opportunity to grow again next year, and we are projecting 75 kids in grades pre-K through the 6th grade. We'll have a staff of 28 individuals who will daily walk with the children, families, and communities to see the seed you planted become transformative in our midst. The work we do cannot happen apart from your financial partnership in this way, and we are committed to stewarding well what you would consider entrusting us to see our community, our city, and our world transformed. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. God bless you. Peace.
All right. All right.